This is Jacqueline White of the Fannin County Historical Commission. Today is July 1st, 2010, and I will be interviewing Muriel Burleson of Ladonia, Texas, on the history of First Baptist Church, Ladonia. Ms. Burleson?
I'm Muriel Evelyn Champion Burleson, and I'm from Ladonia, Texas, and I'd like to share with some things about the First Baptist Church of Ladonia. And I've been a member there for about 80 years. At the present time, I'm 95 years old, soon be 96, and I've been a member of the church for about 80 years. I would like to start back in about 1860. That's when the church was organized. Robert C. Buckner, which is the founder of Buckner's, what we call Buckner's Offerings Home, was a pastor in Paris, Texas. And so he came to our church one Sunday a month and was our pastor for about a couple of years. And he was the one that helped organize our church. It was organized with 8 members on January the 8th, 1860. Robert Cook Buckner came to Paris because he had been, I think it was in Kentucky, and his health was failing, and they felt like that he needed to come to they think about here being a milder climate, possibly. But anyway, he preached, and we know that we have, on January the 8th, Elijah Dupree was chosen as secretary. And the records show they had 19 articles of faith, a church covenant, and rules of decorum. And there was just 8 members. There was Roland and Mary Cobb, Elijah and Harold Dupree, Melvina Pennington, G.W. Wilson, A.J. Moffitt was chosen as pastor. Buckner had been instrumental in building a 2-story structure when he was there. So the church they had the church in it. However, they sat on split logs for 5 years. The story goes. Now then, they did decide that they needed, in 1865, that they took a subscription, decided they'd make some benches. So they got the benches. The lumber was hauled from Jefferson, and Hyman Cobb said he would make the benches. 50 cents for the short ones and $1 for the long ones. So then they had some pews. We also have written up during that period of time. Roland Cobb was one of the members, and if you people know who Ty Cobb was, well, Ty Cobb was a part of the family member of Roland, and they came from Marietta, Georgia. Now, going back to Ty Cobb, you never knew how he was going to react to any situation if you know Ty Cobb or the story of him. I guess the word could be used that he was pretty spasmodic. However, it was attributed to what had happened to him when he was about 13 years old. His father traveled, and he came in unexpectedly one night, and his mother shot and killed him. So the trauma that he went through during that period of time, and we know that he came and spent one summer in Ladonia, Ty did, and we don't know if he was there for 2 summers or not. But anyway, that is about Roland Cobb. And the story goes that Roland Cobb, in one of our meetings, his hogs got in his neighbor's cornfield. You can imagine what hogs do in a cornfield. But anyway, Roland Cobb stood up, and he told in one of the meetings at the church that he was sorry that his hogs got in his cornfield, and he would pay for the damage that had been done. And the neighbor that belonged to the cornfield, he stood up and he said, "I'm sorry I called you what I did." But anyway, they met in that 2-story structure that he had been instrumental in building. Now then they decided they need another building, and so they built another one in 1893, and it cost about $3,000. The pastor at that time was Dr. R.C. Pender, and he served half-time at Ladonia and half-time at Wolf City at that time. Then this tells about one of the times when this was in 1898 when the church met and they had the getting the money, the budget, preparing the budget. So they had $50 for foreign mission, $25 for Auburn home. The value of the church property was $3,500. The pastor's salary was $600. The home Sunday school was $27.40. State mission was $6. Home mission $15. And cold porridge was $1,500. Now I'm sure that maybe cold porridge is not a term that we use now, but that was for missions. At that period of time, that was the word that was used for that. The total expenditure was $675.40. And then we move on to the second church building burned, the one that they built in 1893. That burned on August the 5th, 1909. And of course, they wanted to rebuild. And by November, they had enough pledges and gifts that had been given to rebuild the building, which is the present building that we have today. In April the 5th, 1910, the building committee, they let the contract to build a new church to Ben Weldon and a Mr. Cherry. And that's our present church building, and right now it is 100 years old. And but that time they had enough money, and they let the contract, I think, in April. In May, they reported that things was going well. The Mr. Cherry and Ben Weldon was progressing as they needed to. Also, at that time, they paid $2,604.05. Now, then the groundbreaking was in April of 2010. And they had the first meeting in it on August the 28th, 1910. So the church was built. It wasn't completed on the inside and all, they said, but then they did hold a meeting in it. Okay. It really wasn't dedicated until 2011 when they had the real dedication of it.
1911.
Yeah, right. No,
right.
I'm sorry.
Because we'll want to get that on there, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But anyway, they had several pastors there that came to dedicate the church. That was in 1911.
Right.
Okay. And that was E.L. Comrie, Robert Grimes, T.J. Davis, O.L. Haley, and Dr. George W. Truitt.
Yeah. Famous.
The cost of the new building was a little over $5,000. And we have the pastor's home was built, I guess that was in 1920. But then we move on, and Brother Sauce served as pastor, Reverend C.W. Shaw, in the 1920s. Now that's when, during the Depression, and many times they said that they was not able to pay him in money, but they paid him in produce, maybe ham or eggs or whatever they happened to have. They shared that with him. But Brother Shaw served during the probably the hardest or the trying time of the period. At that time, then we began to support Buckner's Orphans Home. Now, Dr. R.C. Buckner, which had been pastor at that time, the Lord laid on his heart about the children, the orphans. So in Paris one time, he under an oak tree, he knelt down and he put a dollar bill on his knee for orphanage, and he ended up getting $27 that time. And that $27 is really the beginning of Buckner's Orphans Home and Buckner's Benevolences as we know it today. Now, one of the things that we did during that period of time was we took eggs to Buckner's Orphans Home. And for a long time, it was in our budget to share. But I remember that, well, we can't bake a cake because we've got to save these eggs for Buckner's Orphans Home. And so I'm sure that other churches did too, but in the spring when we would take, I could just almost see the big case. I don't know how many does get held, but anyway, somebody would put in their car and they'd head to Dallas with it to take the eggs for the Buckner's Orphans Home.
My goodness.
And well, we'd probably been assigned a certain date, well then other churches would be assigned a date for them to have it. In 1943, up until that time, we had kind of a hit and miss about the financial part of it. I mean, however, a Reverend H.T. Conley came as pastor, and he raised and fixed a budget which we still use today pretty much in financing the needs of the church. We also had, when this building in the church, Mary Reed was in charge of the windows, and we have some beautiful stained glass windows in our church. And they let the contract in April, but in May she felt confident to go ahead and order the windows. We don't know exactly how that was, but then they said that during that time there wasn't anyone in the southern states that made stained glass windows, so someone came from the north that made the windows.
Uh-huh.
And they contracted with them. They had a book, and I can kind of compare it to Sears and Roebuck catalog because they had pictures of windows, the coloring and the style and all. And so a church would pick out that we need 20 windows of this style or with this coloring and all. And we have 4 churches that have stained glass windows, and so probably they all bought from the same company. We don't know that, but then they did. But then we ended up not having any duplication, not in the same kind. But the windows that we have today, I don't know the value of them, but I do know that possibly it would just be almost impossible to replace them. I'd like to tell you about one of the pastors that came in. He came in 1868, and that was Reverend Foster. William Lovelace Foster became pastor of the church in 1868. Now there's a story behind that because William Lovelace Foster was a chaplain at the fall of Vicksburg. But he had a friend, D.B. Muriel, that had been trying to get the Baptists organized up in this part of Texas. Now at this particular time, William Lovelace Foster was teaching math at Baylor University. D.B. Muriel was a graduate of Baylor University. So when they didn't have a pastor, it ended up that William Lovelace Foster became our pastor in 1868. And one of the things that he said was that the Lord didn't call him to teach, the Lord called him to preach. D.B. Muriel died pretty soon after that, and then William Lovelace Foster died the next year. He died in 1869, and they're both buried in our cemetery. But back to the windows that Mary Reed chose in May, she felt comfortable to go ahead and order the windows, even though that I guess it hardly laid the foundation of the church. Also, Mr. Daniels was in charge of the pews, so he went ahead and ordered the pews so they would be ready when the church was ready for it. We also have the story of several people. One of the missionaries that came out of our church was Dr. Francis Greenway. Now the story goes that one time she was in a little pond close to the black church there that she heard them singing, and the Lord spoke to her at that time and told her that he wanted her to be a missionary. That was when she was possibly still in high school. But she ended up finishing high school and never losing sight of what the Lord wanted her to do. And then she got her degree over commerce, and so she went before the Foreign Mission Board at one point, and she wanted to be appointed to a foreign mission field, and so they told her, well, we don't need people with what you have, what we need is doctors. So she said, I'll make a doctor. So she went back to the university, so and ended up, and when she went before the board to allow her to get into the doctoral program, well, they asked her, said, do you have the money to finance your? She said no, and said, do you know where you can get it? And she said no, because it's fairly expensive. But she added, the Lord knows where it is. And so it ended up that she became a doctor, and she was, I think for at least 35 years, she was in Africa. She was appointed. And we have a lot of things about what she did while she was there. She was in charge of a hospital, and I don't know a lot in the medical field. And one of the things that she realized was that they lacked protein in their diet. That was one of their main problems, of their malnutrition and all. And so they told one time that she got 100 pounds of beans, and she didn't know where to put them, so she just put them in under the bed,
Yeah.
And several times we made up for her, and one of the things that she would emphasize that we could give to her was peanut butter and jelly. So we bought case after case. And then one time they needed bandages. I mean, she told it that they just didn't have any. So we ended up getting sheets that people gave us, and then wherever we could get them, and we rolled them up. We cut them in strips and rolled them. We packed them, and they were shipped over to her for the needs that the people had. So but anyway, we have this William Lovelace Foster, the big window in the front of the church, and it was given to his by the descendants of William Lovelace Foster. He came from Foster Settlement in Alabama. Some of the descendants, we had to have it re-leaded one time, and so some of his descendants paid for it. They took the windows out and took them into Dallas, and they re-leaded them. But our windows are real special, and something that was real special to me on my 93rd birthday, they put my name on one of the windows for my faithfulness. So that was a surprise. I didn't know that was coming up, but yet I really appreciate it. But through the years, we've had different pastors, and our men in our church. There's quite a few of us widow women there. But I have taught a Sunday school class there for 45 years.
That's good.
When I'm here, of course, there's times that I'm back down in Mississippi. But when we have quite a few that are like I am, that are widow women, but we're still working on it. And last night we had a potluck supper that we shared the last Wednesday night of the month. We also have a breakfast on the second Saturday of the month, where we share, breakfast up at the church. So we're just still going, and
So you're real active in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is about Dr. Greenway, and one of the said college was totally out because of lack of funds. God's claim on my life gave me strength to enter ETSTC in the fall of 45 to press on to completion, for it to continue to unfold as God's plan. And in the summer of 51, she had a specific leading into medicine with intent to use trade on foreign field. And she, in fact, she entered the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston in the fall of 43, and she was appointed to the Foreign Mission Board in 59. She also attended Baptist Theological Seminary, and today she is in a nursing home in San Angelo. I don't know exactly how old she would be, but she retired from the mission field, and just went into retirement. That situation. And some of the people that have been real special in it was Miss Iva Fowler. And she never went to another church, and she was always there. And she was in my Sunday school class, and I remember that when she was on a walking cane like I am now, she had trouble getting in with her carrying the walking cane and carrying her Bible and Sunday school book. So some of us would meet her at the door and help her, take her Bible and her Sunday school book. But she was so faithful right up to the end. And then we've ordained some, and I tried real hard to get one of these that was ordained into the pastorate to come to their 150th anniversary, but he wasn't available, and that was Billy Joe Franklin. But he and Gene Turman were both in 1951. They were both ordained into ministry, and Gene Turman, that was in 51. But anyway, Gene Turman both of them was over in the college. But of course, they were faithful to the church. But Gene, I guess he might have been 19 or 20 years old by that time. But anyway, he wanted to pastor a church. And so the Dial Baptist Church called him to pastor. And that was in August of '59. But on Saturday, before he was supposed to preach his first sermon over there, he was killed in a car accident, a train car accident. And so, but we still have a copy of his sermon that he planned on giving. And someone gave it the other day at our 150th anniversary.
Nice.
And we also had some to bring back memories of what it was like, because it was growing up in the families that came to Dr. Quentin Burnett spoke, and one of the things he told about, of course, it was understand that we all go to Sunday school and church, in the morning. Their job, I think, on Saturday was to polish shoes. There was 3 of the boys, and so they had to get their shoes polished, but then it was there, and so he shared some things with us that he remembered about being in the church. Then also we had someone to talk about, to kind of bring us update on what Gene Turman had used. Now, one of the songs that he had in his sermon was "When They Ring the Golden Bells for You and Me," and of course he had prepared it, and then on Saturday afternoon he was killed, before he was supposed to ring it the next time. And we have a list of his first sermon, and then we also have his last sermon. And his first sermon was God's divine gift to the world, and of course he had his, I think it's from Romans, that his message was. But his last sermon was the voice of the Lord from Hebrews 3, so we have that. The Lord speaks to us in many ways through pains and afflictions, suffering and sorrow. And then, of course, he had this, but as far as I know, he never delivered this sermon. But this one that I tried to get Billy Joe Franklin the other day. Now, he went ahead and got his doctorate degree, and I'm not exactly sure what he's doing now, but he was president of the Ladonia University in Beaumont at one time.
Wow.
But I called and I talked to his wife, and I wanted to, really get him to come up because he was ordained in our church, but he just wasn't available. And then we have another one, that Eddie Carter. He graduated from high school in '74, and he was ordained in the First Baptist Church in Roxton because he was preaching down there at the time, a college one. I'm not exactly sure where he is now. But anyway, kind of an update on one of them is our Sunday school. We've maintained it all through the years. We've had a Bible school part of the time, not every year. And let's see what else we have in there. This is an update on the last 20 years.
Yes.
And we have the Sunday school. We've maintained it in regular church services, Bible study on Sunday night, and a midweek Bible study, and then the potluck supper on the last Wednesday night, and the breakfast. And in the following, we've given the Fannin County Baptist, the Lottie Moon International Christian Offering, Mary Hill Davis State, Annie Armstrong Worldwide Mission, and a Christmas gift to nursing homes where members of our church are being cared for. And then in 2005, they had a celebration on my 91st birthday, and that was by the State Town School in the Church of Proclamation. And we had a senator there that spoke, and some of my former students. And then on my 93rd birthday, my name was put on a window for my faithfulness.
That's very nice.
And then a special program honoring veterans was in November 2007 and 8. And over 600 names were read by family members of the veterans. And then a group of 25 went to Yellowtail Montana on an Indian reservation on a mission trip. And then on another summer, 25 youth went to South Dakota. It was also sponsored by the Fannin County Baptist Association. And we have a hospitality committee that ministers to bereaved families in our community. Food pantries maintained to help the needs of local families. A love offering is taken to provide for special needs, to pay for the TXU bill of a family and given for the loss of a fire and tragic car accident. And the church gave a monetary gift to Bighorn Baptist Church in Montana for a period of time. And on the 25th of May 2010, our 150th year celebration went well. Our program included former pastors, song leaders, county missionaries, and opportunity for others to express memories of events and other special church activities. Starting with 1860 to 2010, we've had pastors, of course. Reverend Buckner was our first one, and then we follow along. They tell about one of the ones that we had that he didn't believe in tithing, and he wrote a book about it. And of course, Baptists, that's the way we think we pretty well support our churches. But we also had this Reverend Foster, William Lovelace Foster, that came. And then it ended up that his son preached in our church part of the time. Now, some of it we don't have real specific dates on it. Recently, a family came to Debbie, and her great-grandfather was one of the pastors in. She knew that he preached, but she didn't know where. But we looked on our list. He preached in our Baptist church at that time.
Huh.
We've had some tremendous preachers. The other day, Joe Smith came to. He was pastor in 1968. And he came and he spoke at our 150th anniversary. He and his wife came. And I remember a lot of it because a lot of the preachers that came, they had a child about sixth grade, about 12 years old. So I ended up with quite a few of the preachers teaching them. But anyway, Sam Bush is our present pastor. And he came to our church. Seemed like from Brownwood, Texas, and then for a period of time he wasn't, but he's been back at our pastor, for 3 or 4 years. Our social life during growing up was always what's the church doing and what is it has to do with the school. We were all limited when we lived out in the country, and when I grew up till I was in the 7th grade, well, that was about all we knew. And we did have a lot of it was field farming, and so the field work had to be carried on. But when it rained a lot of times, there was some kind of an opportunity for a party or a get together or something like that, which we enjoyed. Yeah. And but we always just accepted it because that was our lifestyle. And all the families went to church, and one of the families that moved into our church that I remember that when I was in probably the 5th grade maybe, we didn't have a lot of people moving in and out because it was a pretty stable situation. But anyway, this girl moved in, and she happened to be in my class, and one of the first things we wanted to know, well, what is your name? And her name was Lucille Hiawatha, Juanita, Sopa, Savannah, Willie, Georgie, Pauline White.
Wow.
So we thought that was unusual to have a name, but she went by the name of Lucille. So our school in our little church, and we've got a picture of that little New Harmony church, and I remember specifically because it had not a single door, but it had a double door. And we've got a picture of it, and Debbie and I talked about it. We've got to see where it is, the picture of it. It was a little bitty picture,
Yeah.
but we had enlarged, and we've got the magnets there that enlarge pictures for us, and they're just so talented. And but anyway, the church in my think it has been a great deal to me. It did to my family and my mother. My father was a deacon, and my husband was a deacon in the Baptist church, and always putting, usually we have such a few men that are available to do some of the things. I know that every so often, but we would have, seemed like it's always an eating meeting of some kind that they had prepared, whatever it was, stew or chili. Sometimes we had watermelons and all like that, but anyway, he was always one of the ones that helped prepare it or helped get it or something like that. And then we had a couple, Richard Jones and Joe Caskey, the latter years after my husband had passed away, that we always depended on them when a faucet was leaking or something needed to be done around the church. They were always aware of it, and then they did it. They took care of it. And now our church is still a 100-year-old building. It's still in good shape, and hopefully we can keep it that way. We're everywhere, and when we got the historical marker for the church, we put the out there, in that we also used the scripture.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start it.
I'm just real pleased to share the history of our Baptist church, and we're proud of our church, and we think the Lord has blessed us through the years. We're thankful that we're still hanging in there, and we're happy to share it with the Bannock County Historical Commission. And like I tell them, that if we don't preserve these things, well, they're going to get lost.
Exactly.
Time will, but I'm happy to share them, and I'm happy that this has an opportunity to preserve these and to keep them.
Thank you.